justice for all.
Please note everyone is in attendance. And this evening we're going to start with our first look at the budget for the fiscal year 2019-2020. But our first item up tonight on reports is the annual financial statement. And Jen, please.
Good evening. Thanks for pulling me out of the office. Everybody has seen an audit report before, so I'll just briefly go over it and refresh your memory. Remember that management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of these statements in accordance to the basis of accounting that they have chosen, and that's the cash basis, okay? My responsibility is to express an opinion on these financial statements based on our audit. Audit is conducted in accordance with U.S. Generally Accepted Auditing Standards. The standards applicable to financial audits contained in the Government Auditing Standards issued by the Comptroller General of the United States. Those standards require that we plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance whether the financial statements are free from misstatement. That's what we have done. The next section, starting on page 9, is management's discussion and analysis. These are the highlights that you will see if you dig deeper into the report. So there's the highlights. You can skim over that. I'm going to tell you how to read the report. On page 20 to 21 is the statement of activities, net position, cash basis of the City of Carroll. This is a combined statement. And for governments, the first thing that you see is not the revenue like you see in a business, but you see the expenses. This is what we spent for public safety, for public works, for health and social services, for culture, recreation, community economic development, general government, debt service, and capital projects. And you will note that the capital projects is where most of the money is spent. Then we have the business type activities, water, sewer, and stormwater. Then we have how do we offset those expenses? The first thing that incurs is program revenues. First thing is charges for services. That's the next column to the right. Then you have operating grants and contributions and restricted interest, and then you have capital grants. Most of that is used for capital projects. Then you see where the deficit is. In government activities, there are deficits. In the government or the business activities, you'll see that the business activities actually have some revenue stream. What makes up the difference for the deficits for the government is all the property taxes. The property tax replacement, tax incremental financing, the hotel motel tax, the local option sales tax, the franchise fees, the interest that's earned on the accounts, any bond proceeds, miscellaneous, and then transfers between accounts. For the government-wide, there was an increase in the cash balance of $278,000 for last year, with $11 million from the year before. Total of the cash balance last year was $11,345,967.92. For business, they increased their cash balance by $769,954. Added to the previous balance of $8 million, you're now at $9,015,888.12. That's what the cash balances were at the end of the year, government-wide. Exhibit B is strictly the governmental, broken down by the funds. The first is the general. Next column is the special revenue for the road use tax to tell you how much money was brought in and where the money was spent. Special revenue local option sales tax is the next column. How much money was brought in and how much and what was used, most of which was transferred to take care of debt service. Debt service, next capital projects, and then all the other governmental funds, which you would see when we flip way back to page 64. That's the other governmental funds. That's the employee benefits, the urban renewal, the Recreation, police K-9 fund, police forfeiture, crime prevention, library trust, cemetery perpetual trust, and the rec center trust. That's everything else. They're not considered major because of the amount of revenue that they generate or the amount of expenses that they generate. Therefore, they are shown separately back in Schedule 1 and combined in Exhibit B. For the government, you brought in $13,267,000 of revenue back on page 23. You spent $14,368,000, so you have a deficit in operations of $1,000,001. But then there was a bond proceeds of $205,000. There's operating transfers in and out, which makes up the difference of $1,223,000. That gives the governmental the $122,000 increase in cash balance. So $11,193,19 is the cash balance for the government. Exhibit C just shows you the difference between our reconciliation, in essence, between Exhibit A and Exhibit B. Exhibit A has everything, which includes internal service, which is in fund transfers for health insurance and things of that nature. And we're eliminating that in Exhibit B. This is the reconciliation. Why aren't my numbers the same for A and B? Exhibit D is the proprietary funds. These are your business-like funds. Major fund of the water fund, the stormwater capital improvement fund, sewer, and then the stormwater itself. And then, all the other non-major proprietary funds you would find on Schedule 2, back on 66 and 67, which is the water depreciation, water meter deposit fund, sewer depreciation, sewer capital improvement fund, and water capital improvement fund. All of which didn't have as much revenue and expenses to be considered major, so they're in total on that column. Total revenue for the business for charges for services, $3,942,000. Operational disbursements, $2,294,000. So you have an excess of receipts over disbursements of $1,006,000, along with use of property and money, miscellaneous and capital outlay, another $122,000. So that, and plus operational transfers in and out, ended up with a cash balance increase for the proprietary funds, $751,000. Added to the 8.2 that you had, you now have $8,996,000 for the proprietary funds. Internal service generated $700,000, spent $500,000 with an excess of $174,000. Added to the 625, there's $800,000 in that internal service fund. Then you'll have Exhibit E, which is again the reconciliation between Exhibit A and Exhibit D, why the cash funds are a little different. Then we have the notes to the financial statements starting on page 29. Bonds payable, there's a summary there on note 3 on page 33. We're required to give you the next 5 years worth of obligations for note payments, sewer revenue, and then everything else is in the general obligation capital loan notes. So you will see the principal and the interest that's due over the next 5 years, and then everything thereafter is totaled. The detail of the notes follows, tells you when we borrowed it, how much we borrowed it for, what kind of monies, and when the payments are due. Pension is note 4, that's the IPERS retirement fund, and it gives you more detail than you want to know. Tells you how they invested their funds, what kind of income they're making on the funds. And then we have compensated absences. You have vacation, compensatory time, comp time off, sick leave. These are all off the book liabilities that if your entire workforce quit and you had to pay all this out, this is what you would owe. Note 10 is the risk management. You are covered under Iowa Municipal Workers' Compensation Fund, and then you are also covered Iowa Community Insurance Pool, and that pretty well covers all of your liabilities. Note 12, litigation. We had several objects for disclosure this past year. We had the Airport Commission, which brought the petition for abatement of a nuisance against the county residents who constructed the grain leg that violates county zoning regulation regarding the protected airspace contiguous to the regional airport. A ruling has not been issued. Iowa Supreme Court is supposed to be handling that next week, as far as we know. City also vigorously defended itself against a lawsuit filed by the citizen against the city and the city manager and the city council to prevent the library city hall project from moving forward. That was dismissed. City is also defending itself on a lawsuit against Drake Construction regarding a contract dispute. The city concedes that the contractor may be owed a payment on the contract, but has filed a counterclaim based on the project not being completed on the contacted completion date and the contracted liquidated damages provision in the contract. In addition, the contractor surety bond provides reimbursement for additional expenses of labor and equipment furnished by the city. There's you entered into some development agreements. We were supposed to be disclosed. The city has entered into a development agreement with Biokinemetrics Holdings. Say it right?
Yep.
Lucky me. And DMBA Properties and Consulting for the construction of a 17,000 square foot building, 2-story, investing not less than $1.1 million in capital improvements. The city agreed then to pay the developer an amount not to exceed $300,000, subject to annual appropriation by the city council. The agreement requires up to 30 payments, provided that the developer is in compliance with the terms of the agreement. No payments have been made at this time. In August of 18, the city entered into a development agreement with 704 Development Corporation for construction of a 12-unit residential subdivision. City has agreed to pay in form property tax rebates for potential incremental taxes to the developer not to exceed $72,000, again subject to annual appropriations. Rebates will be available for the next maximum of 10 years. In October of 18, the city entered into a development agreement with Green Stream Homes of Iowa LLC for the development of a 76-unit residential subdivision, 62 bedroom units and 16 duplex units. The city agreed to pay in form property tax rebates of potential incremental taxes to the developer in an amount not to exceed $600,000, subject to annual appropriations. Rebates will be available up to a maximum of 10 years. Subsequent events. On August 1st of 2017, the city's special election ballot contained a referendum requesting permission to issue a general obligation capital and loan notes not to exceed the amount of $3,800,000 for the purpose of reconstruction, renovating, remodeling, equipment, and furnishing a building for the use of the city administrative offices and a city hall, and thereafter for the reconstruction, renovation, remodeling, equipment, and furnishing of existing city offices, city hall, and library for the use of the expanded Carroll Public Library facility. That passed, and the debt was then issued on November 14th of 2018. City has rental agreements for temporary location for city and city hall operations so that the remodeling project can commence. Then we have note disclosures of IPERS. We have Schedule 1, which is the non-major general fund. We have Schedule 2 on 66, 67, which is the non-major. Then we have the schedule of indebtedness. This is the detail of the debt. How much was originally issued, how much the beginning balance was, how much was issued during the year, how much was paid during the year, and what the balance is as of the end of the year. How much interest was paid on those notes. Page 70 is the maturities of those bonds. And I believe the last bond at the time of the end of the year, 2025 was going to be mortgage burning time, I guess. At this time, it was. Schedule 5 is the Capital Projects Fund. This tells you how much money was brought in, governmental, miscellaneous donations, and how much was outlaid for the street rehabilitation, for the City Hall Library project, for city maintenance building, for the Corridor of Commerce, for the airport, and for Parks and Recreation. And at this time, the capital projects now has a balance of $4,138,000 after a small decrease of the cash fund of $872,000. Then Schedule 6 is the receipts by source and disbursements by function for the past 10 years. So a good look-see of where's the money been coming from, where's the money been going. The final schedule, Schedule 7, is the schedule of expenditures for the federal awards. There was some money coming in from the airport, completion of the driveway reconstruction. We had 3rd Street resurfacing, we had police camera, police training, and we had bulletproof vests for federal funds coming in that were expended on behalf of the city. The report on page 77 is our report on the internal control over the financial reporting on compliance and other matters based on the audit of the financial statements performed in accordance with government standards. The next report is our report on compliance for each federal program in internal compliance. And then we have the schedule of findings and question costs on page 81. We have unmodified opinions, which in other words, we didn't find anything other than what we've reported on here that needed to be disclosed. A significant deficiency in internal controls was not disclosed by the audit. We did not disclose non-compliance, which may be material to the financial statements. We issued a non-modified opinion for the compliance with the requirements applicable to the major programs. Your major program was the federal aid for surface transportation, and the threshold to be distinguished between high dollar and low dollar federal programs was $750,000. And because you haven't had a single audit, you have to have one for at least 2 years in a row, you did not qualify as a low risk, so I had to do a little more work to make sure that you're doing it right, because you haven't done it for a while. Then we do have internal control deficiencies as a finding related to the financial statements. The rec center program collections. The criteria is an effective internal control system provides for internal controls related to proper accounting of all rec center program fees on a timely basis, and for review and verification of those receipts by someone independent of those duties related to the rec center program receipts. The condition was that the rec center superintendent collects and deposits fees and periodically remits the records of those collections to the city clerk. The rec center program receipts were not being deposited in a timely manner, nor were they being properly recorded and accounted for. Thus, the records are inadequate to determine if the amounts should have been collected and were they properly remitted to the city. The cause was that the procedures may not have been designed and implemented to ensure timely collection and remittance sufficient to allow the rec center fees to be properly recorded. Procedures should allow for independent review of collection and deposits of program fees. The effect is that the condition resulted in possible unrecorded and misstated fees and the opportunity for misappropriation. Our recommendation is that the city should review operating procedures in order to obtain maximum internal controls possible. A further measure of control may be implemented by requiring an authorized independent person to verify the collections with the original source documentation. Response upon discovery on April 24th of 18, the city took immediate action to protect the city assets. The city also contacted the city's independent auditor. A face-to-face meeting was held with the independent auditor in late April to apprise the situation. The city continues to update the rec center procedures and make changes to collection and remittance procedures for program fees and will have an independent review thereof. Response is accepted. There were no instances of non-compliance. Other findings that are required to be commented on is official depositories. You did not exceed the deposit amounts on your official depository resolution. Certified budget was not exceeded. We saw no questionable disbursements, nothing that might raise the eyes of the Attorney General. Travel expenses were not noted for any of the city's employees or spouses of officials. Business transactions between city and city officials was Clay Haley as a council member, owner of Haley Implement. It was parts and repairs for equipment already purchased, $3,877. Corey Ventiger is an employee, but he's also a partner of Ron's Lawn Service, who does nuisance abatement cleanup, paid him $560. Excuse me. In accordance with chapter 362.5, paren 10, Code of Iowa, the transactions with Haley and Ron's Lawn Service do not appear to represent a conflict of interest. There are excess balances in special revenue funds, road use, police forfeiture, crime prevention, and the library trust as of June 30th of 18. These are in excess of disbursements for those funds for the year, as was the capital projects fund, street maintenance, capital project, library, city hall remodel, water to utility, water depreciation, water capital improvement funds, water meter funds, sewer utility, sewer depreciations, capital, or sewer capital improvement, water utility, and water storm water capital improvement funds. City should consider the necessity of maintaining these substantial balances, and where financially feasible, should consider reducing these balances in an orderly manner through revenue reductions. Response is that the special revenue funds, capital fund, project funds, and utility funds have planned future programs, and those projects will reduce the fund balances. Conclusion, response accepted. The surety bond was reviewed and found to be within statutory provisions and appeared to be adequate for the current operations. There are no transactions that we believe should have been in the minutes that were not in the minutes. We've noted no instances of noncompliance with the investment policies that the city has. We noted no instances of noncompliance with the terms of the revenue and bond note provisions. Financial condition, we did observe one deficit ending balance in the capital project airport of $168,358 at June 30th of 18. The city should investigate alternatives to eliminate this deficit in order to return this fund to a sound financial position. Response is that the deficit is due to construction cost incurred prior to the receipt of the federal fund. The deficit will be eliminated in the current year, the next year. Conclusion is that the response is accepted. Tax increment financing. Chapter 403.19 of the Code of Iowa provides that municipalities may certify loans, advance indebtedness, and bonds to the county auditor in order to qualify for reimbursement from incremental property tax. County auditor provides the division of property tax to repay the certified indebtedness, provides available incremental property tax in subsequent fiscal years without further certification by the city until the amount of the certified indebtedness is paid. We noted no corrections that were needed to the certification to the county. Urban Renewal Annual Report was approved and certified and filed timely. Any questions?
Could you go over the low-risk oddity thing again? What was the reasoning behind that?
You have to have had a single audit for at least two of the last 3 years. And this is the first year that we've had enough grants that we qualified to be audited under the single audit, which are additional special criteria that we have to go through to make sure that you're handling federal monies properly. And since this is the first time in the last 3 years, that's why you don't qualify, because it's new to you again.
Right, starting all over. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can you give me an example of what, on page 74, what fines and fees are under receipts? 10th item down.
Right.
Right, the bulk of the revenue in there is the fines that we collect through the police department.
Okay. I figured. And if they go to that doesn't all come to us, some of that goes to the court, correct?
This is what comes into your,
And then do we have to do we disperse some of that back to the court
It comes
system?
the opposite direction, from the court to us.
Okay.
yeah, so this is your portion.
Any other questions for Jim? We approve this at a later date, don't
No, we can take a action tonight
Can
to
we take
accept it, yeah.
Okay.
It's been released, and then we'll finish up the filing, the paperwork with it, filing with the state and paying our fee for filing.
Okay. Couldn't remember we did this at like the next meeting.
No, we can do it
We can do it
tonight.
tonight.
Mhm.
If there aren't any other questions for Jenny, thank you again. I'll look for a motion to accept the annual financial statement audit for fiscal year 2017-2018.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. If there is no further discussion, we'll go ahead and vote.
Seaman?
Yes.
Cots?
Yes.
Haley?
Yes.
Base?
Yes.
Dirks?
Yes.
Fleshner?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
again, appreciate your time.
Yep. Happy budgeting.
Next report is the budget work session. And Mike, you want to start right away?
Yeah, I will start and grab Laura's
Yep, hang on.
mouse maybe.
I think we were gonna have a program on the monitor, if I'm not mistaken.
What?
I didn't do this for the city, really.
Okay, why is that not written down?
Maybe we will.
It fell asleep, it's asleep, is all that
It was on earlier.
is. I know. It fell asleep.
Shut off because we weren't using it?
I heard it click, so.
Oh, Netflix.
I'm the generation that likes PowerPoint, so since we have that ability, I'm gonna just run through a few real quick slides. Overview for expenditures, this is overall, all funds excluding transfers between funds, just a comparison. Fiscal year 2019, a little over $25 million. For fiscal year 2020, we're at 23.7 million, so a little bit lower. Obviously, one of the biggest projects that is attributable to that is the Library City Hall project. We had planned to have about $5 million in expenditures in 2019, but there's other projects like the street maintenance garage, and some other capital items that makes up some of the difference, or why it didn't drop the full 25 million. General fund, which is usually the fund people really care about, between fiscal year 2019, the current fiscal year, and 2020 was proposed, both revenues and expenses were fairly the same, but they are down a little bit overall. Ending year balance, this current fiscal year, when we put our budget together, we projected to be about 25.5% of our expected revenues is what we budget for. And this current proposed budget's at 25.1%. For property taxes, we did see an increase in our property tax base by 2.82% on the taxable property tax base. It's good that overall, I think it does tell a really good story in the community that good things are happening in Carroll. Property taxes or property values are increasing. Certainly when you're paying your tax bill, you may not like that, but when you go to sell your home, you're getting more value for your property, and I think that's a good news thing. The city property tax levy overall, We did go back and look at 3 years, for fiscal year 2020, we're pretty much right at the same property tax levy as our fiscal year 2018. We did have a little decline between 18 to 19 and then now to 20. A lot of that was attributable to our debt service levy going down, with projects coming off. We did shift in 2019 to do more set aside for the street maintenance garage project, but still, there was a difference. And additionally, it was a state equalization order year. We did have a good value increase, so that was some of the attribution of why we've seen that decline. Council priorities, there were 2 council priorities that came out of the December 4th goal-setting session. We did include funding for both of those goals. First with the rec center project, $45,000 was set aside to take on planning work for that project, setting it up for a referendum in February of 2020. We also included funding for a code enforcement officer to handle mainly rental housing inspection and nuisance abatement initially. I think as we get that position up and running, we'll also look at adding sidewalk inspections in the future, but that is kind of the priority items, and so both of those council priorities are in this budget. Debt service levy, we're gonna go through kind of the general stuff, Laura will take it over, but I'm just gonna highlight just a few things. We're gonna go in depth on debt service levy later. But the first highlight would be the debt service levy is required to be $1.13.840, and that's to cover just our outstanding debt, including the library city hall project. So that's kind of the minimum threshold we need to do it. In comparison, the debt service levy for fiscal year 2019, where the library city hall referendum was approved, was $1.28, and we'll reduce odd cents there. The current preliminary budget includes a proposed debt service levy for fiscal year 2020 of 1.53 cents, $1.53. This is based on the street improvement projects that we're looking to do this year, and additionally, the purchase of a fire truck. Employment costs, there are 2 additional full-time employees in this budget when compared to fiscal year 2019, our current fiscal year. We do have a code enforcement officer that I noted. We also have a municipal service worker in the Parks and Open Space Department. We kind of discussed that a little bit in the goal setting session, but we do have that position funded in this fiscal year budget. Wage increases, we have negotiated 3% increase with our police union. Negotiations are still underway with our public works group, and there'll have to be some discussion by council that's still pending on where we want negotiations to kind of lead for the public works, and then where are we gonna set wages for fiscal year 2020 for non-union positions. That's a policy decision for the council to make. Now in the budget, we did include a 3% for all employee groups, but the council will need to make decisions on those and set those percentages. Health insurance, we did include a 5% COBRA rate increase in our health insurance. As you know, we do run a partially self-funded health insurance plan that is doing very well. In fact, at the end of fiscal year 2018, we had $800,000. That's our last completed fiscal year. Through the end of 2020, we're projecting that will increase to $873,000. That's a bright spot. This would be an area that, if I had to worry long-term, we're just one cancer patient away from seeing probably 3 years of 25% increases every year. When I compare to kind of our peer communities of what they're paying for health insurance, we're 60% of what other cities are paying. So this is definitely an area that I worry about, but it still continues to be a very bright spot in the city budget. Work comp, there's no proposed changes in fiscal year 2020. We really have to, Greg Schreck's not here, so he can't hear this, but we really have to congratulate Greg and Laura and all the department heads for their work on creating a culture of safety. We just had our work comp group in today, and we were talking through our rates. We are paying, 34,000, I think, in health and work comp next year. Does that sound right?
Our total premium was about 60,000.
Was it six? But that included the 411.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm just
yeah.
talking on the, because that's a different animal.
Oh, okay, then yes, you're right in there, that's about it, in
If
435.
we were average, our premiums should have been about 120,000, but it's because of our low mod rate and then just some different premium savings we receive because we have a very low work comp incident rate in the city, we're really seeing some good savings there. So I think council needs to take a moment and really thank staff, and I really have to impress on department heads for creating a culture of safety. I think it's important, and I think it's kind of comical, I go into the construction sites and I'm the only guy wearing a hard hat because none of our construction groups are, but you really should have a hard hat because there's overhead work going on. But I figure also if I'm not the one leading, wearing that safety equipment, then the employees wouldn't expect to do that. But work comp's a good area for the city. Continued uncertainty, I talked about this in my memo, but I do have an update. We received $194,000 in the backfill from the commercial industrial property tax backfill. That equates to 37 cents if we were to lose that and have to make it up in our property tax levy. Governor Reynolds did release her budget on Tuesday, and it did include continuing the backfill, so that's good news as long as the legislature continues to fund that. Other areas to highlight, we have no increase in utility rates. For this fiscal year, all the CIP items in the budget are funded. There is some funding source tied to each of the fiscal year 2020 items. Future years there may not be funding sources, but for the current fiscal year it is. The street maintenance facility is anticipated to start in the fall of 2020. The budget does include some dollars from local option sales tax of $1.5 million, $590,000 from revenues tax, and $10,000 in interest. By the end of fiscal year 2020, we will have $4.9 million set aside. And I apologize, that's a typo. We're starting construction in 2019, not 2020. Correct, Randy?
Yes.
Even the fiscal year stuff messes me up. Lost and motel, hotel balances are balanced as proposed. We do have some update for lost. We'll share that later on in the presentation. And I really have to thank the staff. Greg gets 2 things. He missed the first one. But anyhow, department heads really make this budget possible. I really thank them for what they do. Laura in particular, she just is a trooper and gets it done. This is my 3rd budget year with the city, and this was probably one of the more difficult budgets. It was, I think, a piece of cake. We could have had a lot more issues to deal with, but we got to tea time, and I really had to bring the department heads in, and we talked through some cuts we had to make to present the budget you have before you today. There's always a lot of needs, and there's always balancing acts of, what are those priorities, what can we fund, what are we gonna recommend to council? And certainly this is our best shot of what we really need to operate the city of Carroll through the end of June of 2020. I appreciate what they do and the hard work that they put in, the thought and efforts and due diligence. I mean, they just really do spend a lot of time. I mean, November, this was all they were doing, was budget time. And then getting it crunched so we could get it here. So I really thank them for what they do. I hope the council does the same. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Laura to kind of start through some of the first parts of the budget.
Thank you, Mike. Are you gonna use the computer too?
Well, I'm gonna pull up the budget document that's.
See up there.
Yep, you'll see it
Okay.
up there, that's online. Okay, so this is your budget book, this is what's online, I just downloaded it this morning and saved it to my desktop to go through the different information. Okay, so under tab A, we always start out with a fund balance projection page for the proposed budget year, fiscal 20, on page 1, and then page 2 is our reestimates. And we always, it's a requirement that when we do fill out the budget document for the state, we have to reestimate the current year since now. We put that budget together a year ago, and, or a year and a half ago, and we've been operating for about 6 months in this current year, so things have changed. And so now we're updating that, and that then becomes our new starting point for putting together our fiscal 20, our next year's budget. If you recall, okay, so this is a listing of all of our funds that we have. Each fund, in essence, acts as its own checking or savings account, however you wanna think of it. You need to have revenue in order to pay expenses out of it. Each fund has its own particular reason why we have it set up. I won't go through each individual one, but if there is one that sticks out that you are questioning, please stop and let's talk about it. Mike hit the highlights of the general fund. That's our main operating fund. Our day-to-day activities of running the police department, the fire department, the parks and rec, the city offices, anything you can think of on a day-to-day basis of a city government runs through the general fund. Then everything else throughout the different funds, there's a specific purpose or specific reason why we have the funds set up. The capital projects, when we get into the very big street projects, building projects, those we set up separate funds because we will probably have multiple revenue sources and streams of money coming in to fund that, and it's just easier to track a project by having its own separate account, so to speak. As Mike said, we've budgeted to about 25% of an ending balance in the general fund. That's always one of our key things when we talk about if we have to cut something. We wanna make sure our general fund is at no less than, or we're not budgeting for no less unless there's an intentional, but we try to only no less than 25% of our revenues is where we want our ending balance to be. Are there any questions in particular about the balances or any fund at this point?
Road use tax money comes from what?
The state,
Gasoline?
that's the gasoline and part registration fees. Do we get a little bit of that as well? But yet the state and the registration fees on your vehicles.
Okay.
And that's a special, what we call the special revenue fund. You get a specific type of revenue that has to be spent for a specific purpose. It can't be spent for just anything. It has to be a specific, and in this case, for road use tax, it has to be road related, something related to roads. Clearing for the snow, the snowstorm that's coming up, can be put into a maintenance building. Our street guys repairing the streets, stuff like that. Okay, if there's no questions on that, we will move on then to the information on tab B. Page 3 is the taxable valuation comparison. We do a comparison year over year. And with this being a year of no state equalization order, we did show that our taxable valuation did go up overall 2.82%, which is very good. We did have residential rollback went up from 55.6% to 56.9%. So that's some of the reason why it went up, is the rollback went up. And that's all determined by the state through a very complicated formula, but they tell us this is what it is. Multi-residential, even though multi-residential went back, keeps rolling back. If you'll recall, we're on a few more years of multi-residential property classification. We'll roll back and eventually get to the residential rate. It went from 78.75% to 75%. So even though we rolled back 3%, we still were able to have growth in the community to overcome that, to increase our overall 2.82%. The commercial, industrial, and railroad rollback remains at 90%. And once again, this is a year of no state equalization order. Those orders only come out in odd number assessed years. So 1/119 valuations, the property valuations as 1/119, that information could be impacted by a state equalization order. There's no guarantee that you will get one, but the odd number years are the years that would come out. Taxable valuation, before I get off that, taxable valuation then becomes our basis point, our basis to work from to figure out how much taxes that we can generate when we apply a levy to it. So the next Page 4 is the assessed valuation comparison year over year. We did show a growth of 1.63% overall, which means the community is continuing to grow. There's things that are going on, which is good. This is basically the starting point of one of the key factors in the formula when we figure out how we get to our tax revenue for the year. Your assessed valuation is your starting point. So if your assessed valuation's not going up or not changing, you're not, your whole base is not, your valuations are not changing, that's gonna impact then how much taxes you could generate in the end. So by seeing an increase here in the assessed valuations, we are showing growth in the community. The next chart is a chart we've been using for a number of years, just showing what the residential property tax has been doing. We usually show a 10-year comparison here. The red line is the assessed value, and then the blue line is the taxable value. And then the percentages of the rollback is noted there above the red line, or the red bar. Just showing you, it shows a nice trend actually, what's going on here in Carroll. We are seeing overall growth is going up. And then what the the rollback has been doing over the years. As you can see, early on, or back 10 years ago, we were under 50%, now we're back over 50%. Once again, that's all determined at the state level. Next is the taxable valuation. Now this is all the property taxes of what we use when we figure out our, taxable valuation that we use when we figure our taxes. This chart does show overall, we are increasing our taxable valuation base overall. The trend is going up, which means we are a growing community. You can probably see in the odd number of years, our equalization order, so there was quite a jump from fiscal 14 to fiscal 15. We did have quite a huge state equalization order that year. That was the year where we had a 32% increase on commercial property. And then it looks like it maybe corrected itself, or came back down, I should say corrected, came back down a little bit over the next couple of years, and then we did have another state equalization order for fiscal 19, or last year when we did budgets, if you recall. If I remember this right. Residential was 7% and commercial was 9%. But then even this year, without the state equalization order, we're still seeing a nice growth. So this is a good chart just to show we're growing. So page 7 is a nice narrative that explains the different types of levies that we utilize or have utilized in the past. These are some of the most common ones you'll see across all the cities. There are other ones that maybe don't get used as much or that we don't use, but these are the most common. The general fund, the 810, you always hear us talk about the 810. That's the bulk of the money that we generate to run the city and our day-to-day operations. The emergency levy is, in addition, if you're at the 810, then you do have this provision where you can levy up to another 27% called the emergency levy. Currently, we at the city of Carroll we are not using it, but there are quite a number of cities that are using it, at least half.
We did use it at one time.
We did, yes.
And we've eliminated it.
Yes, that is correct. So it's not one of those that is voted on by the public. It is one that council has the discretion if they would like to utilize it or not. This budget proposal 20 does not have it in there.
And we can vote to the amount that we wanna do it, a dime, 12 cents, or does it
Correct.
strictly go to 27?
No, you can pick, you can
pick
do,
and
you
choose.
have a dime, 12 cents, whatever. Next is the employee benefit levy. This is where we use to generate funds to help cover our employee benefits for Social Security and Medicare or FICA taxes, our retirement systems, and health insurance. We are utilizing this, though we are not levying to the full amount of what we are anticipating for our expenses. We are using other funds to cover some of our employee benefits. Tort liability levy, this is for our insurance premiums and our worker comp, we do use that under there. And the debt service levy is to cover principal and interest payment for debt that you have outstanding. We are not levying to the total amount of our debt. We do have other funds that we utilize to help cover some of our debt payment. For instance, we're using some local option sales tax funds to cover some of our principal and interest payments. This next page is a summary of our tax levies. As Mike alluded to, or had mentioned, that the levy that is being proposed is $11.59, which is very comparable to the levy from 2 years ago. As you can see, though, it is lower than from 10 years ago when we were at $12.92. So things have changed, things have happened.
It was over 13 when I came on.
Was it?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was over 13, 11.
So the levies we are utilizing are the general fund, the 810, our debt service set at $1.53, the employee benefit at $1.68, currently not utilizing the emergency levy, and then the liability and property insurance portion at 28 cents. Does anybody have any questions? This is one of the, I would say one of the bigger parts of the budget is where we're currently at or what we're proposing here with the levy.
The liability and property insurance has gradually been tapering down. Can you explain that?
We actually are
Yes, we
seeing
agree.
somewhat of a little bit of a decline in our premiums.
Okay,
A lot of that has to do with our worker comp, which we heard some of that story
Right.
today. As well as our property insurance has either been staying very steady or there has been a slight decrease. I did build in a slight increase, I do include about a 5% increase on the property side of things, cause they base your premium on the value, replacement value of your buildings. And
is it of the current year that they are basing that value off of?
yes, the information that we give them for that current year.
Okay.
And we do, if we don't change the value
Right.
from the city side of things, the insurance company is
Insurance.
automatically changing it. I can't remember if it's 1 or 2%, but they are automatically changing it.
Okay,
Unless we go through, and we can probably change it even more, like if we think, a number of years ago, they brought in an independent appraiser and looked at all the city buildings. And one building in particular, I know they just recently did it, but they did it years ago, like our rec center was way undervalued by like, we're talking a few million.
well, for
So,
insurance purposes, that's not
Yes.
a good thing, cause
yes,
we gotta recoup the lot of replacement costs.
Right,
if something
right.
happens.
we were currently with ICAP for that, and so they automatically increase it so that you don't get behind, cause the cost of construction and replacement of buildings is constantly going up.
Go on,
Now, one of the nice things with ICAP is they take your total building value and that's your coverage. So if you had a catastrophic event, the rec center was destroyed, and we find out if the rec center itself was underinsured, if the rest of the city buildings were still around, they would actually shift those dollars.
The value of those around,
Yes.
okay.
Now, if you had a tornado go through town and every building was destroyed, then you could be in trouble.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on the levy? Our next page takes the levy that was just on the page before, applies it to our taxable valuation that we saw on the pages before that, and spits out in this slide the actual tax dollars that would be collected by the different levy sources. So in the general fund, a little over 4.2 million. Debt service, 865,000. Employee benefits, 880,000. And tort liability, about 150,000. For a total tax asking of 6.1 million.
Debt service includes the maintenance charge for next year. Is that what we're in?
No.
Say that again?
Maintenance shed on the debt service, that's not in our list.
No.
It does include, we do have built in here a proposed debt issuance, but the debt issuance, proposed debt issuance is for a fire truck and street improvements, actual streets themselves,
Oh,
not the
right.
building.
Okay, that's right.
And yes, that is incorporated into this budget proposal.
Okay. I bet.
questions about the total tax revenues? Then the next page. The next two pages, the first page of the, on page 10 is taking that proposed city levy and applying it to homes at different values and showing what the tax impact would be based upon the city levy only. We have a couple of years of actuals and then this proposed budget 20. So on a home assessed at $200,000, they would see an increase of $68 or roughly 5.3% from this current fiscal year that they're paying on, based upon this proposed city levy of $11.59. The different home assessed values are 150,000, 125, or 100,000.
We did increase those over last year, that was one of the discussion items last year. And remember, the average value of home in Carroll is about 125,000, excuse me.
And then page 10 takes a look at the tax impact to commercial property. The first example is a commercial property assessed at 5 million. Well, we had a state equalization order last year, so we incorporated that into this. And then, so this $5 million commercial property would see.
Page 11, right, Laura?
Page 11, what did I say?
10.
Page 10, I'm sorry, page 11, thank you. Would see roughly a $1,500 increase in their tax bill from the city portion, which equates to a 2.78% increase over last year. Any questions on page 10 or 11 and the tax impact? The next chart shows taking a home assessed at $200,000, applying the rollback, applying a homestead credit, and then taking the consolidated levy that is currently in place for fiscal 19 and figuring out what the taxes would be to all the different taxing entities. So when you pay your property taxes, this is roughly how it's being divvied to the different taxing entities. So the county is getting just under 15% of that bill. The school district is at 38%. The city is at just under 44%, and then some smaller amounts for the state in DMAC and egg extension. So this is based upon a consolidated levy as opposed to just the city, it is consolidated.
Has the state's amount changed much over the years?
No. The next chart, or the next pie chart, shows this proposed budget and all the different revenue sources that we have and what those revenue sources are in this budget. So the biggest piece of our pie, as you can imagine, is the property taxes at roughly a third, at 31%. Our next biggest piece is the charges for services. So this is fees charged at the rec center, water and sewer collections. So it's not just the general fund, this is all of our city funds. Some other bigger ones would include, we are anticipating to do a debt issuance, so debt proceeds at 8%, miscellaneous at 1.4%. Part of the, why miscellaneous is so big there at 1.4%, 1.4 million, excuse me, 7%, is that includes, miscellaneous includes donations. And we are anticipating some donations from the Library Foundation for the City Hall Library project. We're receiving the other city taxes on the lower right-hand side of 1.8% at 9.5%, 1.8 million, my goodness, 1.8 million at 9.5%. That's a lot of our local option sales tax, hotel motel tax, our cable franchise fees. That's the bulk of it. Hotel, or local option sales tax is most of it.
What's intergovernmental?
That would be grants that we would receive from the government. I'm trying to think what's incorporated in here, where some of the big grants would be.
The Genio grants count?
Yes,
Yeah,
that, I mean, that's what I've got in here, for the library. City
that'd be an
Hall.
example of one.
What would be, is like 250,000.
Airport?
Airport, there's a little bit of airport, I think they're anticipating maybe 25,000. I'm thinking maybe something in the streets, possibly, no streets?
Not for this year.
Trails, did we have one for trails?
Fiscal, I think I had that
Was that
incorporated in
for the-
19.
Oh, okay.
I don't think I
So that
have
would
anything
be
for
road
20.
use tax, would it not?
Yes, road use tax, thank you, that's the bulk of it, that's 1.2 or 1.3 million is road use tax. So that's gonna be the most of that one. And then kind of to wrap up, information under tab B here is our comparison of levies. We've got page 14 that has the comparison of the consolidated levies for our peer group, which we tend to look at other cities' population, 8,000 to 12,000, where we fall right in the middle at that 10,103 in population. Carroll does have the lowest consolidated levy out of this peer group at $25.75, where Keokuk has the highest at $46.24.
Hello, remind me, what's the source of your information on this?
The Iowa Department of Management has all this information for all the cities. Yeah, so if you wanna look at any city, you can go to the Department of Management website and they'll have all the city levies.
Just as a recommendation in the future, I don't know if you want to put the source down in the bottom, so if anybody else looking at it, so that was one of the questions I was actually asked today, so.
Okay,
So your source of this is what?
Iowa Department of Management.
Oh, yes, sorry.
On the next page, it's a comparison of the city levies. Where Carroll is the second lowest in our peer group, same peer group from the previous page. Where, and this is all based upon fiscal 19 data, because obviously we're all working on our fiscal 20 information right now, our fiscal 20 budgets. So the most complete information I can get is fiscal 19. Carroll's levy this current year was set at $11.28, and the lowest is Pella at $10.20. With a high from Denison at $19.05.
Even if we go to 1159, we're still in the second spot. You know, for next year. pretty
Yes.
much.
Yep, just depends on what those cities
Well, they're-
may do.
And I just passed down another chart to council. You know, we got a comment today that people don't pay taxes on the levy, they pay it on a per capita basis. Well, I still don't remember a property tax statement ever saying how many people live in your house. You pay it on your levy, and you pay it on the value of your home. So what this chart shows is, it takes the same city levy page that you have, and takes the average home for each of those communities, as reported by each county assessor for those cities, and then applies the property tax formula. And so you can see here, for an averaged home in Carroll, in fiscal year 2019, you would have paid $727.29 in city property taxes. You compare that to Pella, who has a lower city property tax levy than Carroll, and their average value home is actually gonna cost you $985.75 in property taxes. So it is a two-part component, levy is only part of it, so that's a correct statement, but it's value, it's not the number of people. And one of the things you have to realize is, and I think we could dig into statistics all day long. Carroll, we have a very good, healthy commercial tax base. They take services too. We plow streets, we maintain utilities, police and fire respond to calls. And in fact, our police department, for example, they go out and do tours of buildings, try to help do active shooter drills with different people that want that. Brad, when's the last time you've done an active shooter drill at a single-family home?
Probably never.
Yeah, I mean, we don't, it's a different level of support. You know, we do fire pre-planning at commercial buildings. So what, my point being, just because you have a healthy commercial base doesn't mean we can't get it to a per capita basis. It's not a good comparison. I do think this is a better comparison. And I look at the 5 communities, and we're in the bottom third on this chart of kind of that average residential taxes paid. I don't know if I want to go lower on this chart when you look at the 5 cities below us. So I think you got to keep that in mind. And I think this is a good story that we probably need to start getting out in the future of really, how do we compare to other peers? You know, we talked to Kristen Cooper today about the information we got. She pretty much dismissed it out of hand. But her comment is, when I look at you guys statewide, your levy's one of the lowest, even in the entire state. So I think there's a good story there. We need to get it out and have that discussion, but I just wanted to get this out there because I think it gives you some good context of where we really sit. Because again, you pay it on the value and the levy. Both of those make a difference, and we're low.
Maybe I'm ignorant, but is there any community that pays taxes on a per capita basis?
No.
So that you don't have a true comparison? I mean, the state doesn't do it that way. The state doesn't go around and issue taxes based on a per capita basis. Everything's based on valuation. So I guess it's kind of another, someone's ideology of how things should be done, but
Well, that's why they do the rollback and
Right.
the equalization. It's all uniform. But Mike,
Correct.
didn't you a year ago, give us a chart similar to this where you showed the average home value and contrasted with the city levies? Because I have
think
read
we did.
about cities, towns, and contiguous counties whose property values have been dropping, and therefore they have had to raise their levy just exponentially, because when your values go down, to generate revenue, you oftentimes have to increase your levy. I think that would be, the home value and the levy. You can go on uscensus.org and look at the average home value in Denison, Carroll, Sac City, whatever.
And I
And
think
you will,
we
and
did
then you,
have that
yeah, you
table.
did, I think you
I think
did
it was
do
the
that.
second
That
year he was here,
really
he did
good.
that, yeah.
Yeah,
And
that
that's
was really
certainly,
good. I
we
mean,
can
there's
add that to
often
it.
an inverse relationship.
And I use Denison quite a bit when I talk to people about
Mhm.
property taxes, because the average value home in Denison's $95,000. In Carroll, it's $125,000.
Right.
On that average home in Denison, you're gonna pay, $909, and in Carroll, you're gonna pay
I remember you
$727.
bringing that up
And
a year ago, yeah.
You have a higher value home in Carroll. I mean,
So we can keep,
Right.
Right. So if you had a $120,000 home in Denison, it's gonna be a lot more than $900.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's even gonna be more.
yeah.
I think the towns you're thinking of is, comes to mind Cherokee and Perry, or one of those that are.
I was near and they had to, I think they raised it like almost triple
Yeah.
their. But, I mean, you do
Because
what
they
you
lost
have to
population
do
too.
to provide services.
Right.
Well, what I noticed, at least when our taxes are going up here, our property values are going up. So my balance sheet is increasing, my assets in my balance sheet are increasing. And like you said, you go to sell your home, you're gonna collect more. I never get upset when my assets increase in value.
And the other thing these charts don't show is how many services some cities have compared, you know, we've got the rec center, you know, it's a cost, not all cities have things like that. 18-horse, you know, golf course. So, you know, that, you could go on, like Mike said, you could go on and on with charts, but you'd have to really dig into the weeds.
You know, Iowa State Extension, I can't remember the name of the service. Is it government finance, or they have a division that does these reports now. And unfortunately, last year, all the reports are free. Now you have to pay $5 a community for them. Everyone needs money, I guess. But anyhow, it's a really fast way to do some comparisons. And you know, one of the things that we'll highlight in Carroll, if you compare us to other cities, is we provide some very good quality of life services. What we do at the rec center and
Trail system.
the trail system, I mean, all those things, the aquatic center, we provide a very high quality level of service in those areas.
Sports complex.
They come at a cost, and it's reflected in our taxes ultimately. So those become the issue, is do you wanna start cutting those services? And I think what you'd hear from residents is they value those services. I mean, we have 700 kids taking soccer. It's a reason they do it. It's an amenity our residents expect. I was gonna ask Jack how many kids played soccer, but he's not here, so I'm hoping 700 is correct.
It looks like 700 if you're ever out there.
I was, and it was very cold, very, very cold.
Try to find a parking spot out there.
Should we start into capital?
Well, a lot of with the capital, I think each department will highlight as they go through their departmental budgets. The next kind of big section would be, I know you wanted to cover some debt stuff, and that's gonna get into the weeds, and we're anticipating food to be delivered soon. I guess. Are there any questions about the information we've talked about so far? Tab B is basically is the overview, setting up the information for the departments to go through their stuff.
I'd just make one statement, this is nice to have,
Yeah.
because I have used the other two documents ad nauseum for people that all say we have high property taxes in Carroll. I don't know where that thought came from, that we have these high property taxes. I think it comes from the fact that people feel there's a lot of services here. So if they perceive that, this one is another great tool to use. I'll show this to the same people again who have, I've used the other two. I've even asked you for extra copies of that before. And I thank you for bringing this one up today.
These are all Iowa Department of Management. Is that where you're getting all this information from?
Well, this
Basically.
one, the average residential value I just handed out, it comes from two sources.
Okay.
So the levy rates come from the Iowa Department of Management. The home values was us contacting every county assessor and asking what is the average home value in these
In these
jurisdictions.
particular counties. So
And
you
so then you
generate
end
this
up-
on your own then.
So for example,
There's a web page that I saw today that's got those, it's got the average of the value, and I got it on my computer down in my office, I found it, and I'll show you where that is, so the next time you don't have to go and ask.
well, one of the things
It's got it.
is, we wanted to go to the assessor because, again, that's where property
Yep.
tax values
That's where that
start.
information came from, and they've got a chart,
Okay.
they'll show it, I'll bring it in next Wednesday
Yeah,
or
we'll
something.
look at it.
Yeah, if this stuff is available online, that's great, so we can
Yeah.
easily grab it.
I know when I talked to the Department of Management in our county assessor, they said that information, you really have to talk to the county assessor.
So you didn't get it off of Wikipedia, I take it?
No, I didn't. Should we break then?
Just something that'll take like 5 minutes? Greg?
Greg and Brad, one of the two probably.
Fire together.
Well, why don't we take?
I saw Greg's hand go up
Fire.
first, I wanted to do fire, and
Fire
then
building
we'll get
probably
Brad.
would go quicker.
You wanna
so-
go real quick?
Sure, that's fine.
Sorry.
Okay, to get into the, we'll do the fire department budget first, and you'll find, under tab E, page 45.
Always gotta go to F for fire.
Yeah.
Well, it is under there. But this is, we continued with the summary pages
Perfect.
that we started last year, and that's all under, so all the departments are under tab E with those summaries.
Okay.
Okay, of course, some of the bigger things we have coming up here, I did apply for our initiatives. I applied for a grant to replace 20 of our self-contained breathing apparatus. And another big item coming up here is the replacing of a 1983 GMC towing pumper with a new apparatus. And I don't know, Mike, did you cover, we had a little sticker shock on that.
Yeah, it was gonna be in my debt service section,
Okay.
so, but go ahead.
Yeah, that was a little bit higher than we projected like 5 years ago when we looked at the cost of a new pumper.
That was like 375.
Yes,
First
yeah,
bid,
and now it's about 450, and then the issuance is at debt service issuance cost are at 460, we've allowed for that. You
Two
know,
causes for that, steel increases, I don't know if it's related to tariffs or not. Second is really just emission control changes with the diesel engines. I know we've been seeing that in public works, it's just, it is what it is in that regard.
It sucks.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's a very high cost to engineer to get these diesel engines now putting out cleaner air than what they're actually
yeah,
sucking in.
yeah.
And the engineering to make tier 4 final emissions was very expensive.
Yeah, but it is amazing how clean the stacks are on those vehicles, you don't see any of the old black soot or anything anymore, so.
It is.
It's nice. Okay, the revenue side, and again, if you wanna go back to the details of the budget on tab F on page 88. The revenue that we receive is for providing fire protection for the surrounding townships, and we do that for 5 townships. Maple River is our biggest, and the total revenues that we're projecting is about $17,050. Expenses with the fire department, we're looking at a total of $141,835, and there's not really much of an increase. The biggest increase, or a substantial increase, was the method in how we compensate our volunteers for their time, and I think you went through that in council here when I was out. But that accounts for some of the increase in the budget there.
And that wasn't just the method, but also the rate. too.
Yes.
So we increased it from
15,
10 to
yeah.
15.
Yeah.
so-
Right.
And that brings us into a little better compliance with our IRS regulations, so that's good. Other than that, so what we're figuring the net cost of running the fire department for the year would be about $124,785. And again, I think everybody here will agree, and the council's always been great in realizing what a value that is in keeping taxes low. I think you'd be kind of hard pressed to even hire a full-time person for that range. So we're proud of that, and we do the best we can on the fire department. Just quickly too, we're looking at having a presentation here before too long. We've been saving our dance monies, and we're gonna buy new bunker gear for the entire department. So that will be a presentation that will come up to the council and show you that purchase and talk about it later time, so.
Greg, how do you decide how many volunteers you need?
I've
Do you
just
have a
been working
formula
with
for
the
that?
average per call, and we average around 23 firefighters a call. That's 24 hours a
Okay.
day, 7 days a week. And that's enough to get us going, that I feel comfortable with on-scene for any response that we might have. Now, bigger call, of course, we have mutual aid agreements with all the department in the county that we have, reciprocating service agreements, so that works out well. But right now, I'm comfortable with the 35 we have.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. Yep.
Okay, just one of the bigger things we're doing too, this will be the 3rd year of about a $10,000 replacement project for our self-contained breathing apparatus air cylinders. They have about a 15-year life, and we got those in a grant about 14 years ago. And the problem with getting a grant, it was nice to get it, but all the equipment gets old at the same time in those tanks. We're phasing out and getting new ones. They're no under $1,000 a tank, 4,500 pound pressure carbon fiber tanks. So this will be the third year of that. And then again, the purchase of the truck is gonna be the big thing with debt service. So I don't know whether you have any questions.
When you charge your townships, how do you do that? Is it a flat fee or based on
Well,
population?
we work a formula, and Laura's real familiar with that. Each year we keep track of the number of calls in each township, and then it has to do with population and total taxable value of that, of the township, pretty much explains it. So some of that cost shifts around, and Laura's assessed cost on some of the equipment that we have and purchase, that comes into play here, so.
So,
Yes.
go ahead.
Do you get any pushback at all? From
A little, not too bad. I mean, it used to be, it was negotiated every year, and those were kind of more brutal, and I think most of the township trustees like this formula. Is that what you're getting, Laura, from the trustees when we bill them?
Yeah, I typically don't hear much from them, because I think we've been using this formula for a
Quite a
number
few
of
years,
years, that
yeah.
they're all familiar with it, and the numbers are what the numbers are. It's based upon taxable valuation, the population of that township, and then an average 3 years of calls in your area. And then that all gets averaged together, and then the costs are split between everybody.
Sounds equitable.
Any other questions with the fire department? Okay, if not, we can go to the building department, you'll find that under tab E, page 45. And the initiatives for 2020, as a council priority identified in the December strategic planning session, this budget does include funding for the addition of a newly created position of a code enforcement officer. So that you're seeing reflected in the budget. On the revenue side, we're projecting about $72,500 in revenue from the issuance of the various building permits and trade permits that we issue in the building department. And again,
And Greg, that does include just a little bit, we forgot to change our description there for some rental inspections too.
oh, okay, all right. Yeah, okay, so that'll be included when we get the person on board, if everything goes through. Again, the total expenses with the additional person is $235,405. Less the revenue, the net there is $162,905. Pretty straightforward. All the other operational costs are pretty much the same. No big increases there for any new equipment or anything like that.
And there was some initial startup costs, so that is one of the reasons why service and commodities is higher this year.
I think we have 10,000 in there for training expenses.
Computer.
Is that it?
Yeah, unless there's any questions with the building department. Pretty fortunate, we keep seeing building going on. You talk about taxable value and things we've done. It's just kind of amazing. Some years you don't quite know what to expect, but, there's always projects coming to the front and, keeping busy, so that's a good thing.
Ready, Chief? You want to get yours done real quick?
Yep, no problem. Okay, I'll just go through the cover sheet is probably the easiest way to go through most of it. That is on page 40, tab is like, and then the capital has an increase. Of course, that's the additional squad car. The replacement of the body camera is gonna be the biggest chunk of that from last year. This year we had our server replacement was our biggest capital item.
Hey Brian, the additional squad car, is that an additional one, or is that a replacement?
Nope, so what the plan is to put a 7th squad in place, and we're gonna use some of our police forfeiture and crime prevention funds to take care of the cost differences. With the additional K-9, that tied up a car full-time to one officer, and it really it can be used by other officers, but the K-9 needs to have it available to him, so it's tied us up, it's made us pretty tight on some shifts where we're doubling up in the cars once in a while, so the additional car will take care of that, but we have money. Jenny had spoke about our excess funds in our forfeiture account and our crime prevention, so we'll use some of that to offset the difference. I guess I can break down anything you want on the general part of the police operations if you need to. Otherwise, I'll move on to the next tab, which is the communications. Or the next page, this is our communications, that's our comm center split, we still are 50-50 with the comm center, and our only increase is based solely on salary increase. But talking to them, they didn't have any other changes that they had planned for the next coming year. I think most of the equipment down there is covered by the 911, E911. Disaster services is our weather sirens in town, and that's just electric and replacement of batteries is typically our cost. So not much change there either. The police forfeiture account, this is where you're seeing some of the money come out for different items. In this one, it's gonna be for the equipment for a new car. That's the increase there.
Hey, Brad, real quick, just back up, disaster services.
Yes.
Do you have all the sirens, are they all now linked to where you don't have to go out and?
No, we're still doing it, we're still testing them. We test them every Monday and from April to October.
And isn't there a plan to get everything synced up so that way you don't have to go out to each individual?
Really expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a goal down the road. For now, this works, and it works pretty well for us. I don't remember the exact cost, but I know it was up there to make that happen. A lot of it was the software that was gonna have to be purchased for it.
Okay.
So, yeah, that is a goal down the road. At this time, I don't think it's a huge need that we need, so we'll let it ride for a while if we can.
Okay.
And they're all working, they're all newer systems. They've all been replaced within the last 10 years. Very minimal issues with any of them. Let's see, forfeiture, the revenue, of course, is just interest that we ever gain on forfeiture accounts. The expenses this year, the increase is going to be the equipment for the vehicle. That's the change on that one. That'll bring our fund balance down to just under $4,000. This is an account we haven't touched. I don't know when the last time we've spent any money out of it, so it's just sat there for years, and it's just increased through interest, I think, mainly. Our crime prevention is, we do vehicle inspections, and there's a fee that comes into us for that, and that's most of the money that we do create as a revenue in that area. It's still not a lot, we don't gain a ton of money in the area, but again, the account is rarely used, so it just sits there and increases every year. So we have quite a bit of excess funds in there. We're gonna help to use that to offset the difference for one of the car body camera systems, and also for vehicle replacement difference. So trade-in value, I think we were gonna cut out of that. The end of the year budget shows a fund balance still of $15,000. Again, this is an account we very rarely use. It does pay for our in-car computer error card service currently, and it has done that for many years. Our K-9 fund on page 42, by the end of this year, that fund balance will be at 0, and we're not actively looking for donations for that, so we'll start cutting the costs, and all we have is just training costs, so it's pretty minimal every year. That's gonna come out of our general fund. But we're gonna hopefully get that budget that fund down to 0 probably, maybe about May of this year. So we'll have that account will just stay, I'm assuming we'll just keep it as it is at 0 until future need.
And on the K-9 fund, some of the operational costs, like, I know food, is a vet.
The food is currently given to us by Performance Tire. The vet has given us services also, so there's still people that are donating, just mostly it's in service and not in cash that we were getting. The cash was used for the big cost to get us up and started, so we had the ongoing cost, and then the community's come together really well on taking care of a lot of the stuff that we need. And no change, when we speak to them, they all want to continue doing that, so. So as the bottom of page 42, it shows our capital request. It shows the amounts that are and what the funds are coming from. So the additional vehicle, the $10,000 coming from crime prevention, that's the trade-in value that we've typically got on the vehicles. Office equipment replacement, biggest chunk of that is, the police equipment replacement. Huge chunk of that's going to be the car and body cam replacement. And one system will come out of the police forfeiture for the 7th vehicle. The rest would come out of the general fund. And then the police equipment additional, this current year we have $25,000 budgeted. That's for the special response team, the emergency response team. We're just going to push that off till next year. We won't have any expenditure out of that or for that service this year. And And that pretty much wraps up the police department, unless you guys have any questions.
Why don't we take about a 15-minute break or some dinner, and then we'll, who's next? Randy always goes last.
In fact, I even told him he's not going tonight, so.
Oh. Poor Randy.
That's why he's not.
Essentially $1.14. And that would cover our debt obligations we have for fiscal year 2020. So this is what we need for any new debt issuance, without a debt issuance. Debt service levy, in fiscal year 2018, we talked about is $1.28.
No, Mike, just for clarification, $1.13 minimum that we're required to have, that's to cover the debt, that's not a minimum that we set a levy at, right?
No, that's the debt service levy at the minimum level to cover the debt we have outstanding.
Okay.
If we had no debt, that would be at zero, right?
Well, that was my assumption,
Yeah.
but I just want to clarify.
It'd be a negative with the,
Well,
with the.
with the inflow of the local
Right.
option sales tax,
Could
we
be
have
a-
to
It'd be a negative.
Right. That's-
So, we've talked that we plan to issue debt in fiscal year 2020. We've talked about 2 projects, street improvement projects at $1 million, and the fire truck now at $450,000. We talked about that. But the initial projection was $375,000. However, really steel and the new diesel engine emission requirements, that's went up. So, if you recall back in December of 2018, I guess I'm not gonna really look at this, hopefully these next slides will come out better, but you've seen a summary page like this. This lower part, back in February of 2018, the council gave us direction and picked option 5A. So then when we went into the December 2018 planning session, we gave you 4 new scenarios, and that really then was what we focused on the planning session. The first, the option 1A and 2A really focused it on, do we want to do a street maintenance bond for a street maintenance facility? The difference between 1A and 2A was, or the A versus the B was essentially when we were going to do the rec center. Were we gonna do it in fiscal year 2021 construction or fiscal year 2023? In the end, what we really found was doing it in fiscal year 2023 would cost us more in construction costs. And when you factor that in, even spreading out the payments longer with, because of that accelerated and paying more capitalized interest, what you'd have to do in 2021, it made sense to move it up. So, ultimately, the council at the planning session in December of 2018 said, focus on option 2B. So, there are 2 scenarios, and you can now follow in the book. There's an option A and an option B. Option B.
Page 32.
Yeah, page 32, sorry. Option B is kind of the direction that the council gave us out of the training session. And so when you look at option B and compare it to that option 2B in December, the big changes was, obviously the fire truck went up $50,000. We received values since we actually did those original projections, which that then allowed us to lower the levy rate. Higher value, you need less of a levy rate to cover it. So the difference we did see though, principal and interest went up $25,000, and in part, again, because of the higher values, we could accelerate some of those payments, so that's why it didn't go up any higher, $50,000. Option A, compared to option 2B originally, it includes the $50,000. Now we're extending out the street improvements and the fire truck repayment for 4.8 years to 9.8 years. Obviously, we're gonna pay more interest as we do that. However, as a reverse side, payments to the rec center start earlier, we have less capitalized interest. So overall, we see lower interest rates or lower debt service for option A versus option B. So, looking at the two, option A saves $87,000 in interest costs overall, or your debt service cost. Initial debt service levy rate under option A would be $1.53, which is proposed in the current budget. If the rec center improvement would be approved, then the voters would really be voting on an increase to the debt service levy, and that would go to $1.81. Now, there's a big caveat in that. There is local option sales tax, there is fundraising, there's grant making. We're assuming in these scenarios, and as we get closer to actual debt issuance, we can ferret some of that out. But we're assuming that we would be paying for the entire rec center improvement out of debt service at this point. So obviously that number could go down if the construction needs or the monies coming from the debt service goes down. Obviously that service levy would go down.
Conservatively figured showing us the worst case.
We're showing you the worst case scenario. So preliminary budget, we did build it on option A. Now, if the council decides, no, we really want to go with option B, then we would need to look at increasing debt service levy and possibly the overall levy by 19 cents to be able to do that for fiscal year 2020. So that's really the question is, does the council have a preference? Do they want to make a change and go with option B? It's a quick overview, I guess. Is there specific questions as you reviewed the bonding options that you may have? We can go into more detail. We do have them. Well, they're not really showing up well here, but we have them in the printed book.
I like the idea of option B, I guess you get that street and fire truck paid off a lot sooner, so you're not tying up so much money in that. It does raise the levy rate to $1.72 right away, but it's then gonna be fairly consistent.
But the reverse is, I have more capitalized interest I have to take on at the rec center. So overall, I pay more interest over both projects
Either way.
with option B than option A. So option B carries about $70,000 more interest costs with both projects.
I guess I'm the opposite. I mentioned at our planning session that I wanted to reduce the blow from where we're at now to go to $1.53. We were looking at $1.81 at that night. So that's why I was asking for something, like $1.53. Now, this is assuming the rec center passes, you're gonna add $1.81, but if it doesn't pass, if you look at your charts, you've got 3 years at $1.53, and then it says $1.19 on your 4th year. So you're not there very long, even with a 10-year, was it 9, almost 10 years.
Yeah, 19.
So you're really only looking at 3 years where it's higher.
I think that just from the standpoint, it's deficit versus one big joke.
I just felt to soften the blow, it's not a fully approved levy, it's council. That's my take.
What, Laura, do you know, remember offhand what our highest debt levy, it's been over $2, $2.10, $2.13 or something like that, wasn't it?
I believe so, yes.
Now, what my fear is the general consensus is with the jail and just everything else that's going on.
Yeah.
We're just one part of the pie,
Right.
so.
Now we go back to the consolidated rate, and I think that's part of what we have, part of the narrative is Carroll still has the lowest consolidated rate out of our major cities.
Correct. But I know there's a lot of perception out there right now, is there's just a lot of entities spending money right now.
I understand that.
I don't like your terminology, it softens the blow.
Well, and then also, if you look at it a little bit, if bond referendum does go and you're using this, you're looking at a 28 cents increase for 16 years in the rec center, which is an easier sell.
Easier than what? Than the $1.72 for, what do you mean easier?
Well, instead of raising it to $1.72 right now,
Okay.
which is gonna be council approved. And then you're doing a bond referendum and you're not changing it. But I'm feeling right now, because it's council, let's soften the blow to the public to $1.53 instead of $1.72. That's my take. So that's the debate, I guess.
I might have missed this a little bit. How long is that truck, what's the life expectancy in that truck, like 30 years or something?
Yeah, we
It's
don't- we don't
significantly more than what we're,
See it now, yeah. They've got
I was just
seismic
uncomfortable
tapes.
buying something that we barely have paid off and be looking for nothing, so.
Yeah,
It's a
but-
long.
Yeah, 25, 30 years.
Okay.
So a 10-year loan repayment is not
Not out of,
out of
No.
the realm then.
And based on Laverne's comment on kind of repayment, and wanting to pull that out, we asked Susanna, said, this type of issuance, what would a normal community do? Her first reaction was, well, Carroll would do it normally in 2 or 3 years, but normal communities, this would be like a 10-year issuance. So that's how we built this, was kind of based on her guidance in that area.
And the rec center's gonna be ultimately up to the voters.
Correct.
We're just giving them the information that this is where it's gonna possibly end up if they vote on the rec center.
And again, if you put local option sales tax, if you put, we'll go after an enhanced Iowa grant, there's other grants we can go after. This is worst case.
Worst case scenario.
I think that will come down a little bit. And frankly, I think we wanna look at how we can manage that, because at $1.81, we're taking that out 6 years, 7 years.
That was only.
And that's really, I sense that that's probably as high as the council wants to go right now. That may change, but that means we're really not doing any bonding, any major capital during that entire time. So we may wanna look to kind of rearrange some of those numbers so that maybe 3 years out, that drops down a little bit so we could bring in something else. So I think there is some massaging of those numbers that will occur yet.
I don't know if this is the right time to bring this up. I know I visited with Laura a little bit. Option A looks good because of the savings, the interest savings. I think when we understand what we're talking about when we're talking about the debt service part of the levy, that's getting pretty deep into the weeds when I've tried to explain things to people. And even getting people to understand, we lowered your levy, but why did my taxes go up? It was because the assessed valuation went up. I think us having a discussion about the maximum, debt service levy is very good, because it's so key to our whole levy. But my concern is this, that this needs to pass the first time. Because we originally came out with a plan, not this one, in '07. And at our planning session, we were given that chart on how much costs have escalated over the years, and they will only continue. I look at this as we're going to have one chance, because if it fails, it's going to be more expensive, interest rates will probably go up, the cost of another referendum, a few $1,000s, the blood, sweat, and tears that go into promoting a levy is a part of it too. So what I'd like to throw out there is this, and Mike brought up the local option sales tax angle. We have two challenges when it comes to getting this project done. A yes vote in 2020, spring of 2020.
February 2020.
The
March
first,
2020.
yeah, the first challenge is we have a supermajority threshold to meet. Will just under 10 million fly with the public? It's gonna be a tough sell, and people will not wanna hear about our debt service levy and all of that. They're going to wanna know, what are we getting for this money? And what will happen to my taxes? So our first challenge is getting that supermajority, so we end up with a rec center that is modern and updated, and it's already, by the time we have a vote, it's gonna be almost 45 years old. Our second challenge is going to be passing the local option sales tax. We cannot service the debt that we are accumulating. If you look at page 35, Gerlach's, page 33 and 35 lays out how critical the local option sales tax is to keeping our debt, our levy low. In other words, preventing it from going up. That's what people need to know. That's what they understand. And the local option sales tax sunsets, it's on our local option sales tax chart. It sunsets December 31st of 2023. When we renewed it, the first time it failed, second time it passed. When we renewed it, we had a vote about a year and a half out from when it sunset. You can't just have a vote, when it's sunsetting, and then you're stuck. Because look at, what's page, I think 35 is the best example. I'll try and be really short. How significant the local option sales tax revenue is to impacting our debt levy, projection of debt service levy and tax rate impact. And you look at, she has the boxed in when it sunsets, and then and then if we vote to continue it and let it sunset in another 10 years, she has that boxed in too. So we have two challenges. Passing the bond referendum the first time, it needs to happen. This is something that a lot of people have waited a long time for, and we in this room have. Then the local option sales tax. I would argue, I think there's a strong argument for setting up a fund to reduce the amount of bonds, of debt that we send to the public for the referendum. And you brought up grants. Many grants, or some grants, are last dollars in. If we could, and I have an idea, I'll throw it out there, see what you think, maybe you'll have a better idea. Somehow we need to set up a significant fund, I believe of at least $1 million, to get the amount of bonds down that the public votes for, without cutting back on the amenities. Because we have to get that vote, we have to have those amenities to appeal to a broad range of the public, to pull them in, people that want a gym, people that want the swimming pool, that kind of thing. And I think we have a better chance of reaching that 60% threshold if we do reduce the amount of money we bond for and send to a citizen vote. I think that will help with the local option sales tax vote. That will have to happen sometime. We had the vote.
Probably want to do that in 2022.
In 2022, right.
Yeah.
The vote passed in 2012, started collections January 14.
Yep.
And and we need that to service the debt. The two together, reduce the amount of debt we have, and then get the local option sales tax. That is the equation or the ingredients for keeping our levy down. The Daily Times Herald wrote a fabulous article on Thursday, August 2nd of 12. and they talked about how significant it was to sell and to get a yes vote for the local option sales tax. And I will read you a statement from Laura. The city's property tax levy is $12.93 per thousand valuation. Without help from the local option sales tax, with no cuts to the budget, the rate would be at 13.64 per thousand valuation, said City Finance Director Laura Schaefer. So those are our two hurdles, those are our two challenges. I think we need to give ourselves every advantage we can. And so what I'd like to recommend is, when we had our planning session, we had the 500,000 across the board for the streets. We're looking at, scenario A is very sound because it saves on interest. Other people may have different ideas. But we looked at the local option sales tax distribution, 18-19, 500,000, 19-20, 500,000, and so on, until the local option sales tax drops off and they show we're getting half in fiscal year 23-24. Now the streets are in option A. I think that's smart. What I'm thinking we could do is reinstate some of the money into the local option sales tax. We dropped it in the new plan that we have for our budget proposal. So we had 500,000 for streets budgeted in the local option sales tax. It was dropped. It was also dropped in the current budget. Another 500,000 was dropped from local option sales tax for streets in the budget we're considering. It was, streets are funded from local option sales tax at 75,000, which means it was 500,000, dropped by 425,000. What I'm suggesting is we restore some of the funding that was allocated to the streets, but now was dropped because we're going to bond, well, that's what I have from our planning information. It showed 500,000 every budget cycle from the current budget all the way to 23-24, but dropped because we're bonding. And I would like to have everyone consider, maybe put some thought to it before we meet again, consider reinstating not all of the 500,000 as we move across the budget cycles, but some of it, so that we could build up a reserve for the rec center project, and we could reduce the bonds by about $1 million. I know, does everybody have your budget proposal?
As I look through there, Carol, I think that 500,000 went down to the street maintenance building.
Well,
I'm reading that right.
So we did add it.
right, that, the 350, so, okay, I'm just throwing it out.
Yeah.
Some people better with money than me, or numbers. Here's what I just kind of thought through, may work, may not work, but we would still be carrying over balances. In the current, re-estimated 18-19, the budget we're in now ends June 30th, if we could, let's see, okay, keep it as it is, and in the new budget for 19-20, fiscal year 19-20, there was 500,000 there, and I know we have 1.5 million for the street maintenance building. If we could, I added at the very bottom, rec center fund, if we could allocate 100,000 of the 314,139, reduce it to 214. Okay, reducing that balance to 214, Then we have, and this isn't affecting the street maintenance building,
No.
we did have 500,000 for streets. It was reduced to 75. If we could reinstate the 425, all right? So then we'd have the 425 for the rec center, the 75,000 for, streets. That would reinstate, I'm not talking about taking money from a project, that would reinstate the 425. Then, down below where we have the aquatic center slide, use that for the rec center fund, push the slide into the next 21-22 budget year, but then also add another 100,000, so we would have recouping the 425, adding the 375, and an additional 100, that would be 900,000 in lost in 2021, plus the 100,000 in lost in the budget we're working on now, which would give us a rec center fund of $1 million by just shoving the slide down. As you go all the way across,
By the time you get to
we would
21,
end up
22.
with a 256, 560 carried over into 21-22. We will have absorbed $1 million, so we would end up with 398,982 balance in 21-22, and so on. So at the end, we would end up with 851,000 in 23-24. I just think we should give ourselves every advantage. I think doing that would help us with a vote. Prices are gonna go up, we're gonna lose that advantage if the vote fails. We haven't taken anything from streets, we haven't taken anything from the garage. All we've done is reinstated funds, restored funds that were previously allocated, that are no longer allocated for the streets because scenario A and B, whichever one we go with. And we've shown a commitment for any grants we would apply for. Like I said, many are last money in. It's grant writing is time consuming. This is real money in the bank, not hoping to get grants. Fundraising is really hard. You need a strong team really hitting the bricks hard.
Could you have that scenario, maybe on that for Monday?
Well, my other question would be, I mean, Mike and Laura, are you guys putting your heads together with Jack to determine other ways to do it? Because that kind of was where my mindset was when we left our planning session, was the idea was let's find ways to figure out where to pull that money from and get moving in that direction. We haven't really got any information from you guys if you've gotten into it yet, and I'm guessing you haven't.
Well,
so.
and I think honestly,
So,
I mean, outside of local option sales tax, hotel motel, which is very limited, and debt service, there's really gonna be limited city resources that can go towards it.
I was just looking, it was already there.
Right.
And we were good with it at our planning session. It was already there, the balances that were carried forward. I'm just saying if we could reinstate some of it, we're off and running. We're showing the public, we're making an honest effort to reduce the debt, to hold down the levy, and we're working hard to make good use of the taxpayers' dollars. Plus the local option sales tax, it's countywide, and that means other people are paying for this, and they use it. And I think it would appeal. We need both. We need to pass both for us to have this rec center project.
I agree with the mayor, I'd like to see a revised version of the budget proposal for the loss just to wash it out like Carolyn's done here. Log in, see it.
So if I understand correctly, and certainly we can sit down and have a conversation too, but take the FY '21 street rehab projects back to 500,000. Push back the
Well-
aquatic center,
Yeah, well, push, not the rehab, but allocate what was previously, street rehab, allocate that, the balance to
The
425 for the rec
Okay.
center.
I was,
Yeah.
Do you
I
wanna
was not
see what I'm
following what
doing?
You know, hold on just one
Yeah.
second. Could I recommend that perhaps y'all get together outside here and over
And
that?
do a deal.
Yeah.
Work it out, and bring back
Do a
a,
deal.
bring us back a clean version of it, and we'll look at it.
Yeah,
Well, also,
so we can keep going with the budget meeting.
Yeah, I'm sorry I
so
took
also
so
your
long,
construction
but,
proceeds would have to
Very
be
good.
less, so we'd be able to show what a reflection that would be too.
Well, and one of the things is, I think, it's not gonna change what we do. I mean, one of the things you have to think is, we're way out on when we're actually gonna be doing the debt issuance.
yeah.
What, the street maintenance and fire truck, we're really locked in. You gotta pick one
One
or
or
A or B.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What happens to the future debt, that's just gonna go down. I mean, the rec center debt levy number will go down. I mean, if you want us to get revised, one, we can do that.
I see where you're coming from.
I'm more interested in option A from the interest savings standpoint also.
I mean, you'd have the same interest savings either way.
But I think if you get that, that sheet in the orientation, so that we have those figures placed in there, I started to write them in there, but, yeah.
Yeah,
Losses.
but even if it doesn't pass, you're only at $1.53 for a few years.
Right.
No, you had the numbers. I mean, you had to do.
So you're basically
I didn't write it
killing a lot of birds with one stone.
how much it's gonna escalate.
What's the other side of the table think?
What's the slide going, what happens to the slide, Jack? If it gets pushed back, is it the one we have there functional that long?
They're both functional. They just have lost a lot of use. I think at some point your your aquatic center is 10 years old. You want to look for new amenities. To
Just
try.
the switching would be just jazzing it up.
Yep.
Yeah.
I will tell you, my daughter hates cars. It's like, are we
What?
there yet?
What's that?
But if we have a choice, and Glidden's too far for her, but if we have a choice between the Carroll pool, the Glidden pool,
Because
the slides.
they're
They're not, she's 5, she doesn't wanna go down a
They're-
speed slide.
they're too big.
Yeah.
They want the curve.
We need a different option.
We need an
we need
enclosed curved one.
But the trade-off is waiting 1 year to help make the rec center pass.
Absolutely, I agree with you on that.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you know, hopefully have a new slide in the rec center. So
Yeah,
There you go.
so you wanna help the rec center pass, or you want a new slide? That's.
What do you say, Jack?
But that's why,
Yeah,
that's why.
Yeah, I don't mean to put you on the spot, Jack, but,
Yeah,
yeah.
let's get the rec center passed.
there you go.
If you needed this side of the table's opinion, mine would be to stay with A also.
Mine's A also.
Man.
We're picking on you.
Yeah.
I said that a while
You
ago.
like that, yeah.
The savings.
I'm getting that paid off, I don't like hanging on to it, but, I mean, if it makes it work, let's, go that route.
It sounds like you've got full consensus on
Yeah.
A.
And
For
and-
the
and we
street
can-
improvements.
We can revise the local option, it's really not gonna affect this year's budget. Except we are allocating a little bit.
100,000 in that, I mean, we can
Right.
put a placeholder, so to speak, on this sheet.
Yeah.
And it would be a transfer, yeah, if you wanna approve that, I mean, it will affect the budget if we want to get that fund started, actually started in the
Into
financials.
this,
You
in
mean
this,
from the budget we're in?
Yeah,
yes.
but budget 20, sorry, the proposal.
Yeah,
The way Carolyn had explained it was to
I-
start
I
a
think
fund
that-
for fiscal
For-
20.
Yeah, I get it.
One.
yeah, I may
Right.
have said it wrong.
No, you didn't, you're fine.
But also, you look, Eric, at B, and you look at the par amount of the bonds, the rec center over almost 10.5 million, I think that.
Right, and I
Yeah.
argued with Mike on Wednesday about it,
It's
and me,
optics.
I'm one of those that if I've got debt and I got a way to pay it off faster, I'd rather get rid of the debt.
Yes.
Because that frees up your capital down the road. Now, your capital's laid up now for 10 years when you do it that way, versus 5.
Yeah.
And if we have some growth things that we need to do, we're hamstrung, and that's what has happened, over the last 10, 15 years. We've had enough debt there that it's hamstrung us. We haven't been able to do things, so
Yeah.
now a lot of that's coming off, but it took time. So if you can get to the end of that faster, that's my take, but.
I may be wrong too, I'm thinking, when the rec center passes, I think that will create impetus for the lost, for the local option sales
True.
tax.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I understand what Vern's saying and what everybody else is saying,
But-
that 153 versus 172 is not such a sticker shock.
Well,
And I
there's so
get that
much
too.
that's going on in the jail and
Right.
everything else, the football field.
Sure.
But, you're talking of going from like 5 years to 10 years, but you're not talking on a $6 million bond referendum, you're talking 1.45 million. So
Right.
it's not quite so tying you up, like you were saying.
Yeah. And I know we've had some, where we've issued some debt, when I first was on council, where we've restructured it. Some of that stuff. We restructured a couple, and yeah.
Cause interest rates did go
The
down.
interest rates went down.
We're not
That you
currently in
could
that
save.
environment though.
No.
We're going the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's bound to happen.
Right.
All right.
Go back at some of the
Yeah,
interest
Any-
rates.
Cost of construction is more than the interest rate so far. Increase.
Oh, Rachel, are you ready?
Yeah,
Let's hear what you have to say, please.
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if you turn to page 49, that'll be the summary sheet under tab E for the library. So accomplishments from the past year, I just kind of went over some basic statistics. From fiscal year 17-18, like the circulation, the program attendance, and like people visiting the library has remained steady. The fiscal 20 initiatives include moving into the new library space, and along with celebrating 150 years for the city, it's also the 125th anniversary for the library as well. And we also plan to offer new library services in our new facility and programs as well. So, the detail of the budget, if you wanna see that more, is under tab I on page 106. But for under revenue, we're projecting to bring in about similar amount of revenue as we do in fiscal year 2019, as we will in 2020. Under expenses, you can see an increase in personnel services. That's mainly due to a switch in insurance and then the normal increase in with staff salaries.
That's right.
And then you'll see a decrease in the services and commodities from fiscal year 2019 to 2020, just because in most of fiscal year 2019, we've had the temporary library costs and also covering costs of the old place, especially with like gas and electric. And so in fiscal year 2020, we don't have as much overlap as well, so that's why that's decreased overall. The one last thing, there's no capital item requests for the library in the next fiscal year. You'll also notice under the full-time estimates, we have a slight decrease there in the fiscal 20 budget, just because I purposely planned to, we've had 2 library page positions resign, and I purposely left those open for flexibility, just in case with this new library, if we need more desk coverage, I can allocate that more to somebody to cover the desk or to a different part-time person. So that is why that is set up that way. Is there any questions about the library budget?
If you don't have a page, does the staff restock the books?
Yes, or that part-time person that can help cover the desk too, they can help do that too.
Okay.
I'm also kind of budgeted with those flexibility of hours, I could give them to the pages if they need more hours too, so.
How
That
many
would,
hours do the pages usually work?
they usually work 2 hours, every day. I have a page for
Yeah,
2
every
hours
day.
every day, and we've been doing really well. Excuse me, I can't talk today.
We've been down 2 pages for a while, and my 2 pages have been doing a really great job of keeping up.
So you normally have 4?
We normally used to have 4, and then we have 2 really awesome pages that just really get their work done.
So they just kinda come in like after school and work till you close, is that kinda the same thing?
Yeah, right now I have 2 adult pages, so I have one that typically comes in the morning and one that kinda comes after a full-time job.
Sure.
So, but yeah, it works out really well, so.
Any questions for Rachel? Thank you. Jack, you ready?
I am. I'd be the next pages, right after library, 51. Several pages after that. I will just go off of the cover sheets. You've looked in the other tabs at the details on those, but like Mike mentioned earlier, we would like to have a full-time employee and cut back on some of the part-time hours. Typically, we've tried to have 4 permanent part-time staff. Those individuals would work 32 hours a week for 34 weeks. 36 hours for 34 weeks. And then we have kids at college, 12-week, 14-week. We used to budget 14 weeks for the college kids, but anymore it's about 10 weeks when they get back. And with vacations and different stuff, we just weren't getting the help. This past summer we did have good college kids, but we don't anticipate that every year. So we get another full-time person that would alleviate some of our needs with the part-time staff that we use. So that's personnel services, that's why that is up. Services and commodities is down. I just, again, verified with Laura. We had put 75,000 one year, another 75,000 in for MO Ashbore. And that's why it had the 281, 230, because 150,000 of that is for MO Ashbore. In the upcoming budget, we're budgeting 25,000, but that 150,000 is held. So we'll have actually 175,000 available when that time comes. We have not seen, we know it's in the county, but we have not seen the Ashbore necessarily in our parks or cemetery at this point. Capital outlay, we'd like to replace one of our trucks and have a dump box on it. Mower, cab, and blower, we need to replace all 3 of the components of the mower this time. That's why it's up a little bit normally. And then a tractor. We actually have 2 tractors that are quite a bit older, have a lot of hours. We keep one out at the baseball, softball fields, and we have one in the garage, but we want to replace the bigger one. So that's where we come up with $107,000 for the parks.
Where do you keep this tractor out at the baseball fields?
In the shed. It's a very small tractor.
Back, okay,
Yeah, it doesn't have a
Back
backhoe or
end.
anything like that.
okay.
No.
This is a little compact thing.
Yeah.
Use it for dragging the
Yeah.
infield and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I got it.
Yeah, it's very small.
It's too big to mow your lawn
Close enough.
Any questions with the parks?
Jeff,
No.
could you, I just, real quick, because I was thinking this extra person, some of that conversation came from the fact that, we didn't think we'd get one person that would do everything that Scott was doing, is that right,
Right.
Roger? Is that partially part of it?
No,
Two?
no, it's just strictly from our part-time staff converting that. So we're not trying to find 6, 7 people for the summer. We very rarely get that. This past summer, we had a lot of college kids who actually turned a couple away. Just, there were some situations in the community that opened up some college kids to try to find positions with us. Some other opportunities didn't transpire, so, but we don't anticipate that every year. So, and a lot of times you see these individuals that we want to work the 36 hours for 32 weeks, they're retired. They want to be retired for a reason. They want to maybe work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. They don't want to commit to that. And they want to maybe leave. We try to staff them until October 31st. Well, when the fall starts, they have other activities. Their grandkid, there's different things going on that they wanna be at. So we don't really get that many hours out of one person at a part-time.
And those individuals, we don't pay health benefits and all that stuff. You just
No.
pay them a straight salary.
Straight salary.
Or straight hourly wage.
Yes, they'll get IPERS, FICA, all the other taxes, but no,
Right.
not health insurance.
They don't get all the other benefits.
No.
Jack, I'm curious, what's the increase from 2,500 to 4,000 in overtime pay? What's your anticipation there?
Probably there'll be some more hours, for staff down at the baseball fields, Merchants Field. There just might be a few more hours required,
Just some
outside of the
backfill-
7 to 4
some
weekends,
backfill from Scott? Yeah.
possibly, yeah.
And then a very healthy increase in medical insurance premiums.
Cause you're having a full-time staff.
Yeah. How many full-time staff are in this right now?
There's a superintendent and 3, so it'd be a superintendent and 4.
And then you're gonna go to 5, right?
No,
No, you're gonna be 4 in this year.
right, 4 full-time and then 5.
Sorry, I took back the detail.
Both scenarios have 1 superintendent. Which we have replaced Scott's position. No, they'll be April 1, they'll be.
Golf course next?
Oh, yeah, I didn't know if you had any other questions, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Golf course, they have started the patio cover out there. The snow kind of stopped a little bit of that, but that is moving forward. Revenue has pretty much stayed the same, at the golf course. When we raise rates, we lose 3 or 4, or, a few members. That usually is offset when you raise rates with raising rates and a few people leaving. Personnel expenses up just a little bit. That's due to, your raises, your yearly raises with the staff. Services and commodities about the same. And the capital outlay, greens mower, a turf spreader, that's replacing one that is very old out there. This one will be a little bit more friendly, usually, they'll be able to use it a lot easier. User friendly, there we go. It is 8 o'clock.
More good.
Yeah, more good. And the pump station and irrigation system, we funded that right now at 1/6 of the cost of it. Basically, the pump station, things within the system, basically the way it explained to me, the golf superintendent said, you take off the roof, take all the guts out of the lift station, and you install new, put a roof back on. No, it's not broken, but we've always had a history in the city to replace things before they become a problem. And this is the same thing we would like to do with this, is the pump station. And then the irrigation system, it's just replacing components of the heads. I can't remember what Scott told me, the number of heads are out on the golf course. But it's to enhance the heads out there at the irrigation system. And right now, if Scott has a problem, he needs to turn down a section of them to work on maybe 1 or 2 of them. But this new system, he can pinpoint which one it's out there on hole 7, in next to the fairway. He just shuts that one off and can repair it. So much easier, be a lot better. Our projection is to budget $41,750 this year, and then over the next 2 years use other funding sources to get up to the $275,000 that we need to do it in 3 years. When we were talking to golf superintendent Scott, we knew this probably wouldn't be fully funded at the rate we were asking, but we're about 3 years out that we really need to start worrying about it.
How old is it now?
it was put in before me, that was 2005, I wanna say 2000. It's maybe close to 20 years.
20 years?
I don't know, Randy, do you remember the pump station out there at the golf course?
I don't, that's probably pretty close.
2000, yeah.
So as Jack indicated, we are doing a third, or a sixth of it this year. And we've made some revisions to the CIP, which we'll talk about later. But, let's see here. Here we go. We're proposing in future years to allocate 58,000 out of local option sales tax in FY '21 and 58,000 out of FY '22 for pump station irrigation. And then we take an equal amount out of general fund. So we would anticipate we do a project for the irrigation in fiscal year '22 and start saving
okay.
for that
Gotcha.
now.
Okay.
So that is a revision that's not in the packet at this point. We'll get it out to you.
Anything else with the golf course? I hear a lot of good things about the staff out there and how nice the course is. When you get people coming into town, they say these are as nice as Des Moines courses and other places around. So we got a staff that really cares about what they do out there. And you get a chance seeing these part-time staff, both the parks and the golf course. They're kneeling down, getting under their mowers, cleaning them out, blowing them out. They take care of their equipment, and that translate when we go to trade in. We get good trade-ins for our equipment because we change the oil, we make sure they're clean, we fix the things right away when they need to be fixed. So they do a very good job.
They got good lunch out there too.
Yes. Yep. Get a chance to have lunch out there. They do a good job. Rec center then. Put in the additional fitness equipment this year. Our fitness room is really nice. If you get a chance to go down there, I had to wait last night for a treadmill at 6:30. That's how busy it is. Things are going well there. We worked with the swim team to put in new starting blocks last year. And then the initiative obviously is to update the master plan to more of what we want to put out for the vote to the public. Memberships stay pretty much the same. You look over the history of it. Personnel expenses is down just a little bit. New staff. We had other staff full-time that were at top of range. Now we have newer staff that is not top of range yet, but they'll eventually get there. We want them to stay. Services, commodities stays about the same every year. That's your electricity, gas, operations, repair and maintenance of the building. So again, we have a 60,000 square foot facility. As Carolyn mentioned, it's going to be 45 years old here pretty soon. So it does need some tender love and care. Capital outlay, light poles, north side entrance, 24-hour area. It is lit up. Probably would be nice to add a couple more of the lights like Randy uses in the streetscape project. So we'd like to add 2 out there, and then the 2 on the west side, the big parking lot. Those 2 poles are aging, are looking like they could be repaired. We'd like to replace those 2 with that. So just updating the lighting and the poles out there to get them to look a little bit nicer. Fitness equipment, we typically fund $25,000, but with other things and to make the budget work, we dropped that $10,000. We'll be fine. We have a lot of new equipment. We have a maintenance program where we have company come in, service them quarterly, look at the machines, do repairs that we need. So we'll continue that. So we're comfortable dropping that $10,000 this year. And then the HVAC upgrades. Building's getting older, and it's time to look at the heating and cooling units, doing repairs to them. It's not taking out the old system and replacing it, it's just repairing the guts of it. So that's how we come up with the $92,200.
Jack, are you having some marked troubles with the HVAC system?
Nope.
Or just preventive maintenance?
Yes. Yeah. We just want to, there's better efficiencies, we'll save some money, hopefully have more energy efficient equipment and things in there, but,
Is a revamp of the HVAC system coming with the proposed upgrades to the rec center?
when we do some of the work that we're doing in the pool area, the locker room area in the past, we've assumed that we're gonna have more units and more work to do over there, so they've kind of looked at that when we're doing some of our repairs.
So it might be additional, not replacing existing, but adding to it then?
Yes.
Okay, I just didn't wanna,
And this amount doesn't replace all of the
No.
equipment.
oh, I got you, just fixes the,
If I remember right, there's 8 units that at some point need to be addressed.
just so we're not gonna stick the money into them and then
At the
truck
old-
them over the side of the building
Right.
in a few years, yeah.
Yeah.
Some grease on the squeaky wheel.
Yeah.
We replaced all of the lights. What year was that, and did that save our electricity? Can you
That's-
tell me?
3 years ago?
Yeah.
3 years?
I mean, I'm
We
looking
had a
at here,
2 or
I don't
3
really
year
see that it
process.
changed much.
We had a rate increase about 2 years ago.
Okay.
Change the lights.
Changed the lights and we broke even.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and you can really tell the difference. It's a brighter in there. It
Oh, you
was
can
it
tell
was
that.
so funny when we did that in the pool. The people were saying, "We need sunglasses." It was so bright in there coming off the water. And Laverne, Misty, they're in there all the time. It looks so nice in there now.
You can see the bottom of the deep end now where you never could before.
Well, I will interject in your budget, this has nothing to do with it, but, thank you to Jack and the folks down at the rec, they have worked with Deb. The pool is now USA qualified, and so, we held our first inter-squad USA meet this week, and that was super fun, and there'll be more coming. USA meets are a lot of fun, and they'll bring in a lot of people, and there's gonna be a lot of visitors
What
coming
was
to town.
required in it, is at least,
It has to do with just, the size of the pool, like some of the depths of the pool, how the markings are in the pool, what your lane lines are, how many lanes you have.
so the starting blocks did they have something to do
I
with
think
this?
they had
one?
something to do with it, I don't know all of it,
Okay.
but yeah.
That's
it's-
nice to see.
Yeah, they did.
That's good.
Deb told me they did,
Yeah.
because they had that back push off.
Yeah, I just went through some of the training last night, so it's a lot of information in a couple days, but it's gonna be fun, there's gonna be a lot more people coming to town, she's gonna do good with programming, some of those meets, and we'll be seeing an influx of people. It's more
And
parking.
again, our getting the rec vote passed, and we're gonna have the swim meet in all 6 lanes, and the other pools open. So Laverne and all the other people that want to walk yet, this time I was able to use the sauna and whirlpool. So those are nice things, and it'll be good.
Jack, just because we're on the rec center, have you or when are you getting the 24-hour access open?
We have all the cameras in. We've reviewed we're hoping February 1.
Thank you.
We reviewed with the staff all the extra doors that need to be locked. We've given the keys to the police. They're going through, even now I see that they're coming in, just checking the facility. We're writing a few rules and just different things that we want people to know when they sign up.
Coming for February 1st works for me.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Yep. Anything else at the rec center? All right, leisure services, these are all the programs that we have, baseball, softball, soccer, flag football, just our expenses for that. Our recreation program specialist, secretary, and aquatics and fitness specialist, and part of my salary is out of that, that's how you come up with the personnel, $236,000. Services and commodities did drop just a little bit. We had to move some of our part-time umpires and some of the pays that we have for those up into the personnel expenses. That's why there's a difference, a little bit of a difference. Now umpires have time cards, they fill out all the paperwork that we have. So that's why the personnel expenses went up a little bit. And the services commodities went down. nothing in the capital items for next year. And with that, aquatic center, paint the pool would be the one thing again that we'll look at doing. That's every 5 to 7 years we need to paint the pool. Any questions with that? And then the cemetery, pretty close, just a small increase. We did have, truck. It's time to replace, we have a dump truck that's aging, but the other truck that we drive around, is aged. It looks, it's rough. So we need to replace that. We like to replace it with another dump truck because we have the perfect scenario right now. We have a funeral Friday and then we'll have another one Monday. So we actually dug both of them today, anticipation for the funeral on Friday, and then we're gonna have bad weather. We didn't want to dig it on Monday, so we have two. So they had to use some other trucks in the city to hold the dirt. When we dig out one of the graves, we dig it out enough. We have a full dump truck. We go dump it. They come back, fill up the truck again, and then when the funeral's over, we come and use that. That's on the truck. We dump it in the spot. But now we've opened two of them, and this happens more often than you think. More and more people want to have funerals on weekends where they can get family and everyone back. So we have a lot of Friday, Saturday funerals. So this extra dump truck would be nice. And even right now, that dump truck has the dirt on there. We're gonna have snow. We use that truck to move snow at the rec center parking lot. So it'd be nice. We usually take the blade off when we go up to the site to fill the dirt. We don't want the blade on there, hit the stones and stuff. So we'd be able to keep one of the blade on the truck most of the winter, and we're not taking it off. Every time you take stuff on and off, it gets a little bit worse. It doesn't work as well as it did if it was left on there. So with this truck, we'd be able to have another truck that we could use as a dump truck.
Have we hired a new sexton yet?
We have interviewed last week. We're discussing. We hope to make an offer early next week.
So your personal services, is that reflected all? It'd be kind of hard to right now, I'm sure, but only $4,000 increase, is that?
They'll be hired within the range of the current sexton. Yes.
Okay.
That would be my budget. I sure answer any questions. Any additional questions?
How long has our current sexton been in that position?
He started in 2000, so he was here 18 years.
Jack, can you get a truck with a dump body and for $27,500?
That's what, yep.
Cool.
We're doing the research. I know it does seem low. I had some staff help me making some calls.
Sure.
It's not diesel.
So we talked earlier about the department heads really coming together and making a number of cuts. I would note that within kind of those need items, the majority of the cuts really did come out of parks and rec, leisure services, cemetery. We had to make about 250 after I went through with all the departments one-on-one, reviewing their budgets. We still made about another $250,000 in cuts in budgets, and about 200,000 of that came out of parks and rec, and leisure services, and cemetery, golf. So, I mean, there is a lot of needs. We always do balance those, but I also kind of hats off to Jack for really kind of stepping up and helping us with some of those cuts.
Were these things that we had in the past that we gave up, or new wants?
Well, it's
Okay.
pushing stuff back, it's replacement equipment that's not happening as soon. It's emerald ash borer. I mean, we know we're facing an issue probably 7 to 8 years from now, that I'd like to start saving for that, so that we're not cutting down every ash tree in 1 year, that we're not doing it out of general fund dollars, totally.
We did start saving for that.
Yeah.
Well, we would have liked to have saved 50,000 this year,
Sure.
and we're not even close to that, so.
We are replanting, other trees somewhere else, nursery trees, I thought, don't we have that further?
We have a small nursery, we haven't added maybe like we wanted to, but
Are we able to get those trees free through, like, I'm
Alliant
just,
used to have
like the
something like that.
NRCS, are we able
Well,
to?
you can,
There
So
were
the-
seedlings, yeah.
Well, ours weren't that small when we got them, so I just didn't know if the NRCS is the same for government as it is for people out in farms, and
No, because that's soil conservation.
so I just wondered if there was some other place where you could be trying to capitalize on that.
Do we have, I know we have a lot of ash trees in the cemetery, but at the golf course,
yes, well,
where would those be? I'm trying to think which trees would be ash out there, if any.
there's gonna be a bunch and probably 5
I'm sorry, what was that?
on hole 5 down by the green, in that area through there. Then back probably by 12 or 13 green. So Scott did go through, I wanna say it was you wouldn't think, it was similar to the cemetery. Both of them had about 70, 80. We had a lot more in the parks.
Okay.
So,
Who's that, there was that lady that used to come from Alliant. Years ago, we haven't seen him lately. Annette, yeah, I think I talked to her, that was one of the last times that she came, and I thought they had trees that you could get. Alliant did.
Alliant and Mid-American might have
Yeah.
some, again, I think they're pretty small. But we'll look at it, yeah.
Small is better than nothing, I mean,
Right.
you know,
Yeah,
you get something,
yeah.
okay.
And the one thing, the other thing we're looking at was a chipper. We're trying to hope with the streets, he's putting in 50,000, but that didn't make it. You know, if we we do take out a lot of trees,
Yeah.
especially streets, they take out probably more than we do. And we didn't fund a chipper. The one we have is aging. Our tree spade is very old. So if we wanna make sure we do these investments, we'll have to update the equipment too.
How much is a chipper?
Chipper was 50,000. The spade was, used one was 25,000. And we did have that in the budget right now, when we were talking about removing what Mike mentioned, that 200,000, that was one of the things I gave up was the tree spade, so. We got one, it works, we'll do a little bit in the fall, it's, this time you wanna do those things is mid,
Spring or
late.
fall, yeah,
Yep.
okay. Well, don't throw them off to the side, I mean, let's keep them in the back of our head, cause if something doesn't come up with, something we can do. Okay? Thanks, Jack.
Thank you.
Want to do that, and then have Randy start right away on Monday,
Well,
or
Tuesdays.
Tuesday, yeah.
Tuesday, but we have some groups coming in that are asking for increases, that'll be the first thing.
Oh, that's right, okay. Sorry, Randy.
Where are you trying to?
But is that just the groups, and basically Randy left, we might be able to be completed by that point?
I could.
Okay?
Is it here Tuesday?
Yes, sir.
5:15?
Yep.
All right.
Need a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second, and no other discussion, go and vote please.
Cox?
Yes.
Fleshner?
Yes.